Our next speaker is a longtime friend of public transportation. He is a consistent advocate on our number one issue, fixing the Highway Trust Fund. I'd like to ask J.C. Van Atta, the Director for Marketing and Communications at the Tri-County Metropolitan District of Oregon, or TriMet, in Portland, Oregon, to introduce Representative Earl Blumenauer. J.C.
Good morning. I have the honor to introduce our Congressman Blumenauer. And when introducing him, we enjoy telling a fun fact that the International Amalgamated Transit Union has named only 2 people as honorary members, Congressman Blumenauer and the comedian Jackie Gleason for his portrayal of the bus driver Ralph Cramden on the 1950s TV show The Honeymooners. Now, maybe they both deserve that recognition because both have brought a lot of awareness around transit. Here are a few things about what Congressman Blumenauer has done. He created a new way of approaching urban areas under the mantle of livable communities. He has helped communities revitalize and realize their potential, as he says, to stay healthy and be economically secure. He started an entire movement back to rail by starting a conference called Railvolution. The first Railvolution was held in an attic in a Portland church. The next year it migrated to an auditorium of a Portland high school and was a day-long event. Now it's a week-long conference attended by over 2,000 people from around the world. Without Railvolution's momentum and transmission of ideas and support, transit's political support would be minimal. Finally, as a member of City Council, he reintroduced streetcars to Portland, and in Congress, he created legislation that created opportunities for other cities to realize the same thing. Earl is the father of 21st century urban rail. So I'd like to conclude with one more fun fact. TriMet has only issued one lifetime transit pass, and that's to our friend, Earl Blumenauer. He has done so much for transit in Portland, Oregon, and for those of us across the country than Ralph Cramden or anyone else I know. Please help me welcome from my hometown, Congressman Earl Blumenauer.
Thank you, JC. It is true, I was awarded a lifetime pass on TriMet. They gave me the honor, but they also gave me a pass that was so large. You had to have a backpack, so it's never been used. I continue to welcome opportunities to support the transit agency. As I look around the room, there are a number of you that I've had a chance to work with over the years. And Jack outlined, I thought, very well the challenges that we face. The bottom line here is that we're in pretty good shape with most people in Congress. Unfortunately, the dynamic that we're looking at sets us up for, I think, tough times over the course of the next couple of years. First and foremost, we just passed the largest transfer of wealth in our nation's history. And we did it in the Ways and Means Committee. I think we spent about 23 hours. I think it was maybe $10 billion a minute or something, rushing through this legislation. I pointed out at the time, actually several times in the course of this, that people had no idea what they were voting on and that they would be probably a little bit embarrassed as these things came out. And sure enough, there's a story virtually every day about the unintended consequences, mistakes, things that people didn't know about. Who knew that we were passing tax-free farming in that bill? If you sell to your commodities to a co-op, you get to deduct 20% of your revenue, not just your profit. People are kind of scratching their heads. The Chamber of Commerce has come up with about 37 items that need adjustment. Bottom line is that we have undertaken this massive transfer of wealth, giving it to people who in the main don't need it, and we did nothing in terms of rebuilding and renewing this country. And in fact, immediately thereafter, you heard the drumbeat. People weren't worried about the deficit when the bill was being passed. a $2.3 trillion increase in the national debt because you have to pay interest on the 1.5 increase to justify reductions in programs that people care about. Not this year, because we sort of cut the deal, adding more to the deficit, but the deficit is swelling. It is going to create serious problems for those of you who are involved with capital-intensive enterprises. Anybody here borrow any money? And those of you who rely on local bonds, that you get local support, the tax deductibility is going away for those communities who actually invest. And so it's going to make it more difficult and more expensive going forward. And we've got an administration that has different philosophies. Abrogating agreement in the Northwest Corridor, for instance, and that this is I don't know if it's a bargaining tactic. It was interesting, virtually nobody in the New York business community was on board with the Trump campaign, and it may be that they had some experience dealing with him. But turning his back on New York, New Jersey, the whole Northeast Corridor is not a good sign. They tried to eliminate Tiger grants. And thanks to the leadership in Congress and your advocacy, they remain. But you look at what qualifies for Tiger grants, virtually no transit support, things that are just lots of just glorified road projects, undercutting the power of the Tiger concept that so many of you have been able to leverage in your communities. Ultimately, I think we're going to right the ship of state. Ultimately, I think we will get something back in the Department of Transportation dealing with a bipartisan infrastructure initiative. It has always been bipartisan. It has been broadly supported, even in some really troubled times. But how we get there at this point is going to be a struggle. We need your help, although you're dealing with all sorts of challenges today, disruptive efforts in terms of the applications like Lyft and Uber, changing the calculus locally, autonomous vehicles, notwithstanding what happened in Arizona this week, are coming. And I think more rapidly than we anticipate. I stopped keeping track of the number of companies when it passed 260. Millions of miles are being logged, new technologies, and the interaction between autonomous vehicles and these exciting applications are going to pose challenges. They're already posing challenges. We know if we do not properly regulate, manage, and understand applications like Lyft and Uber, they can actually result in more congestion, not less. And part of our challenge is to make sure that it's not just Lyft and Uber that can monetize congestion. We have to seize on that in terms of how we go forward to fund transportation. I've been sort of Johnny One Note. I left the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee that I loved, although they've indulged me to be able to debate the points and argue with them, and I feel like an honorary member of the committee. But I went to Ways and Means simply because I felt that we needed to have a robust program of funding infrastructure in this country. It's the fastest way to put millions of people to work at family wage jobs. I am a little bit of a transportation junkie. I have just really enjoyed my work in this space and watching what you do and traveling the country, seeing innovative proposals and programs put into effect. But it's under the surface is actually in worse shape. Sewer and water, 1.7 million miles, much of it at or past its useful life. And then the electrical grid, broadband. These are things that livable communities rely upon. And Congress has, in the main, been asleep at the switch, whether it's harbor maintenance or our work dealing with Amtrak capital needs. And part of it, a big part of it, has just been we haven't faced up to the need to provide the resources. Now, the simplest would be raise the gas tax for the first time in 25 years. When we first introduced that, and some of you were a part of that, we had the broadest range of support for any major item before Congress, and it remains broadly supported. Look at the Chamber of Commerce coming out, finally putting a number of 25 cents per gallon behind that. The eloquence of the Trucking Association CEO, Chris Spear. They pay half the freight, literally, and they're there with money, chalk, and marbles. Contractors, transit agencies, engineering firms, the traditional road gang. They all are aligned, organized labor, most of the environmentalists, if we play it right, even cyclists. Our challenge is to not let up the pressure. Our challenge is to build on the successes of more than half the states that have stepped up to fulfill their responsibilities. And what's happened in regions around the country. I'm proud of what happened on the West Coast 2016. Seattle, LA, San Francisco. People are ready to do their job, but it requires a federal partnership, a full federal partnership. We're not going to go back to the days of 92% federal funding. I don't think we should. But it is important to make sure that there is that federal element for so many of the projects that are multimodal, multi-state, and frankly, long-term. And being able to provide that framework is absolutely essential. I am hoping that you will help me be able to move some of this forward. I would hope that as you visit on Capitol Hill, that you make one simple request to the House members that you come in contact with. Not so much a commitment to some of the legislation that I and others, my friend Peter DeFazio will be here in a few minutes, and he's a veritable font of assignments for us on the Ways and Means Committee. My goal in life on the Ways and Means Committee is to give Peter all the money he can spend, hopefully chairing that committee next Congress. But the first step is to have the Ways and Means Committee exercise its responsibility. I was sort of Johnny One Note with 3 different chairs of the Ways and Means Committee, suggesting that maybe we have hearings on transportation finance. That's our responsibility. The finance title is Ways and Means. And we have had, in 7 years and 3 months, we have had exactly 1 witness for 5 minutes before the Ways and Means Committee. Think about that. We've been facing a significant challenge of funding transportation. We've gone through all sorts of gyrations to avoid sort of having a collapse, jerry-rig systems, kicking over tin cans, using all sorts of funny money and accounting techniques, but all of it basically borrowed to just hold the system together. And we've had 1 hearing, 1 witness, 5 minutes in 7 years and 3 months. That's legislative malpractice. And I don't think that's unrealistic for you and everybody else who's in the infrastructure space to at least allow the system to air the issues, to be able to have that debate, You know, you give me 2 weeks of hearings before Ways and Means. The kickoff panel will be Trumpka and Donahue, AFL-CIO, U.S. Chamber. Let's bring Chris Spears back, because that one witness I was able to get in 7 years and 3 months was Bill Graves, who was then the chair of the American Trucking Association. But his testimony was particularly poignant because Bill was testifying not just as president of ATA, but he was a former Republican governor of that wild, liberal state of Kansas that raised the gas tax not once, but twice. Think about the impact on Capitol Hill as we have a parade of people come forward from the transit industry to talk about problems with the state of good repair. I mean, there's a reason, there are several reasons that we are looking at some challenges in terms of ridership. Part of it is we're not able to adequately fund the capital to keep it in a state of good repair here in Washington, New York, and around the country. The power of that testimony. I want to have legislators from South Carolina testify how they overrode the veto of the Republican governor of South Carolina to raise the gas tax, and why. I mean, we have lots of red state legislators that could come in and testify, and local officials, and people who are concerned about the advocacy for lower income people for whom adequate transit is essential, and the burdens that are placed upon them when they don't have adequate transit. I want to have testimony from some of those communities that have stepped up with adequate funding and what difference it's made. The results in Seattle and Houston, they're around the country. You can be able to testify to the impact of doing it right. And the role, again, of what happens in terms of being able to have that robust partnership with the state and federal government. I don't think it's too much to ask. Do your job. Let the American people review and reflect on the need, the passionate testimony we would receive all across the political spectrum, all across the country, for what's happened and what we can do. One witness in 7 years and 3 months for 5 minutes. There was, you may have followed, a terrific hearing before the T&I committee. Bill Schuster's come around to support raising the gas tax. And they invited people in to make that case. And they did, eloquently. I've organized outreach from the Ways and Means Democrats suggesting that we do that on our committee. What did we hear from the chair of the Ways and Means Committee? He was looking forward to hearing recommendations from the T&I committee. The finance title is ours. We're not going to outsource that. We shouldn't. Well, I don't want to get carried away. That will be Peter DeFazio's job when he comes in a few minutes. But I'm deadly serious about this. We have an opportunity. We have a compelling case. We've got a coalition. You have been beyond patient. And the challenges are only going to mount. Because we're looking at a whole new system of infrastructure, finance, and development in the foreseeable future. You know, those autonomous vehicles, which will be coming, they're all going to be electric and paying no fuel tax. And if you're in a municipality like mine that relies on parking revenue and traffic fines, those are going to fall off. The bottom falls out of the financing model. And we have to deal with road user charge which again, we've been working on in Oregon, and that's the third part of my legislation. Raise the gas tax, index the gas tax, replace the gas tax with something that is sustainable over time, a road user charge, which can easily be adapted to congestion pricing. And I'll leave you with one final thought, that when we get to that point, there is, I think, a grand bargain that can be enacted. Now, our friend Max Baucus, when we were pounding away on the road user charge, made the point that he was representing Montana, where people drove big rigs and they drove them long distances. I attempted to make the point to Max and his staff that, well, if you are in a state with big rigs and driving long distances and you don't think road user charge is a good idea, think about a system that is financed by gallons of fuel consumed. Who's going to pay that, Max? It's not going to be the gas-sipping Prius drivers in Portland. It's the people in the F-150s or old beaters. Making this transition actually helps rural and small-town America. And there is a potential grand bargain to scale up, to have congestion pay more. Congestion is the biggest single cost of our system. And people who would benefit from the relief of the congestion are in fact willing to pay more. It costs UPS $50 million for 5 minutes delay on an annual basis. So we could raise fees for the congested areas. We could cut a little break for rural and small town America that isn't paying quite as much. We can balance this in a way to get the political momentum, to get a system that works better, and one that is sustainable. That is our future. Now, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, I don't know. But the sooner we work on it, the sooner it comes to pass, the stronger you're going to be, and the better the system will work, and the stronger America will result. I appreciate your patience in allowing me to rant for a moment. I appreciate the work that you do. Looking forward to being your partner to see if we can't do better than one 5-minute hearing in 7 years and 3 months. And with your help, I think we will. Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah. If somebody has a comment or a question, that'd be fine.
And I'll start you off if I might.
So who are you?
My name is Rob Healy. I'm the former vice president of government affairs at APTA. Anyway, my question is strategically, as we go to the Hill and, we're looking to meet with members who are perhaps a bit more conservative than you on the gas tax and such. Is it so, we've been somewhat agnostic. We'd be happy to take a user fee that makes sense in any way, but I think the gas tax is probably the short-term solution. Is there any advice you have for us on approaching your peers who are probably a little less receptive toward raising the existing gas taxes?
Well, I think the case has been made in red states across the country that it is the easiest and most effective. It's something that people are used to. It's inexpensive to administer, and it doesn't pose a problem. In terms of the road builders did some survey research politically. People who voted for those fee increases got reelected at a higher percentage than people who voted against it. But this is not political. This has been nonpartisan throughout the history. It's only been when we started weaponizing tax increases and the gas tax took on this aura that it has been controversial. But over half the states have done it. It is a way for us to meet our obligations without adding to the deficit, but acknowledge that it needs to change. It's not sustainable over time. But in the short term, we have to support both systems, the infrastructure for the future, for the autonomous vehicles, the electrical vehicles, the electrification stations, a whole host of changes that we need to make in signalization. And we've got the existing infrastructure that we have to maintain and work. I think taking it straight on, helping people with the history and the politics, I think there's more receptivity for it than people think.
Peter Varga from Grand Rapids. Thanks for all the work that you've done. What do you think about vehicle miles traveled as a means of revenue source in the future? When do you think that will come around?
I think there is no alternative than having a road user charge. With all the electrification that we're seeing, we've been experimenting on that in Oregon, I think, for 11 years. That's how I pay my road user charge in Oregon. I'm part of the demonstration project. In the last reauthorization, we were able to embed in it money for pilot projects around the country. And it's gaining momentum locally. And I think there is no viable alternative, and I think we can structure the road user charge to provide lots of benefits for the traveling public. They can have, if they're going to use a smartphone that keeps track of their miles and debits their bank account, it can also tell them where the closest parking space is, or bike share, or car share, or pay for transit, or for Amtrak. It could be a seamless transportation experience that I think is going to provide lots of opportunities for the motoring public, and increasingly the millennials who don't want to be tethered to a vehicle. They're perfectly happy to Lyft, Uber, car share, bike share. That's the wave of the future with them.
So I can't let you go without you.
So who are you?
Alan Wolkin with the Wolkin Group. I can't let you go without asking, what do you think is going to happen this November in the House?
I think the Democrats are going to pick up a whole lot of seats. I think the odds are that better than 50-50, that Peter DeFazio is the next chair of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. There's a lot of churn out there, a lot of churn. And I find it interesting, not just because I want my side to win, but I think it's important that you think about how you surf that interest. People want to be involved. People are really quite agitated about things they see. They want to make a difference. Look at what those kids in Florida are doing, moving the impasse surrounding gun safety, forcing politicians back on their heels, gaining momentum. I think you have an opportunity to think about how you engage the activist elements in terms of transportation equity, in terms of housing opportunities, in terms of investment to put people to work, improving your community. There are people that are waiting, and I think this is an opportunity for us to figure out how we work together to engage them. And I think that will have permanent benefit, regardless of who's in control of the House of Representatives, that we can re-engage people to be part of a movement that you are a part of all across the country.
My name is Ray Chambers, and I'm the president of the Association of Independent Passenger Rail Operators. We operate most of the commuter services that put competition out, but this is a personal comment. First, I think that your vision is absolutely the right vision. I think your move to Ways and Means was great because it's the pay for that we've got to come up with. And I think your approach is what's going to happen. One of the things that has been kind of in the back of my mind as we look at the pay for, maybe it's time to move beyond, raise the gas tax, try a VMT, but there's a lot of users of this transportation system. So why don't we start to think, maybe even on a demonstration basis, but small fees that would go across the board for all of the users of the infrastructure of the transportation system. I mean, I'm talking about automobile manufacturers, truck and rail manufacturers, freight movers, passengers, intermodal, and so on and so on. But I think that there's an idea here that would change the basic nature of it in terms of trying to create a broad-based user fee that all of the beneficiaries participate in.
It's an interesting concept. One of the concerns is that when you layer what we're doing going forward and dinging more interests and companies and industries, it adds to the complexity. But if we have a uniform road user charge and tied to congestion, that will be embedded in the cost of the vehicle and will be translated up and down the chain. So it's an indirect way of getting at what you're talking about, but we do need to have broader base dealing with things like water infrastructure, for instance, having a similar approach. Thank you very much. Good luck on the Hill, and let us know what we can do for the next round to be able to take it beyond these little things I'm talking about. So what's going to be really visionary?